It's recording? Yes, yes, it's recording. It's recording. Okay.
Let me get rid of the waiting room.
Oh, thank you. Okay, thank you. And now we have to also open up.
Three dots.
Cyber Campus?
No, the top middle.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think this is this, yeah. And they asked me to change my. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so European Politics Society.
Attendance.
Yeah. Go to attendance. It's not yet. Before smart attendance. Is it 10 o'clock? And is it not yet? Not yet. And so, okay. And so here. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. Start attendance, and your number is 757. Yes, 757 is your lucky number. 757. And we are recording, and I'll let that run. And then we will go to our class material. And so let me open up the lesson plan, if I can find it in all this mess here. Lesson plan, where's the lesson plan? There's the lesson plan. And just to open up, there we see. So yeah, so this is a big week. You have the two chapters on France and Germany that you're reading this week, and that's a theme in all of the literature in studying European integration. This peace strategy for Europe is that Franco-German cooperation between Paris and Berlin, between France and Germany. Yeah, during the Cold War, the capital of Western Germany was bombed. That is the driving force. Franco-German cooperation is the driving force behind, a driving force behind European integration. So here you have the two chapters on France and Germany. And as I told you, even though Olivier Rosenberg's got a German name, he's definitely a native French speaker writing in English. And Tim Weichelt is German, and Simon Bulmar, I can tell that chapter is written by somebody who's a German writing in English. The English styles are different, you can tell. So there's a lot of information in those two chapters. And since Franco-German cooperation is supposedly the driving engine, how do you say engine in Korean? Engine, okay. This is really important for understanding the European Union as a peace strategy because of the conflict between history between Germany and France during the 20th century and before, of course. The common statement is made over many years is that for 1,000 years, the French and Germans leaders have been preparing for war, fighting war, or recovering from war since the kingdom of Charlemagne in the 9th century, 8th century. Charlemagne, it's a French name, right? We always use that name in English, Charlemagne. Charlemagne. It means Charles the Great, Lamagne, the Great. We always say Charlemagne. Charlemagne is both a French national icon and a German national icon. Important to Germans and French, both. I can't imagine such a comparison between, say, Korean and Chinese nationalism. Do you share both an allegiance? I mean, do you admire the same individual as a sort of father figure or the founder of your Korean nation and Chinese nation? I can't imagine that, but they share the claim to Charlemagne. And then Charlemagne died, and his sons divided up the Frankish Empire, and they've been fighting each other ever since. And so Franco-German cooperation is really important. And so Europeanization of France and Germany is really important. And we've already been covering a little bit what's going on in France these days. The main point I want to make sure we get across is that, and this is emphasized in chapter 5 here, is that Germany was reconstructed after World War II in the context of European integration. So it is the most Europeanized of the European Union major powers. It is the most Europeanized. It was embedded in European integration. It was allowed to rebuild after the shame and humiliation and horror of what the Germans did. Oh my God, look what Germany did under Hitler. Look at the genocide, the millions systematically murdered. Oh my God, what are we going to do with Germany? This crime state, this horrible, horrible thing. And fortunately for Germany, I'm being funny, the Cold War emerged. And everybody remembered, oh my God, the Germans did bad things. But then, the Soviet Union. Oh my God, the Soviet Union is led by Stalin. And Stalin wants to try to do what Hitler tried to do. And the Soviet Union is much stronger than Germany. And it has nuclear weapons. Oh my God! We're not going to worry so much about the terrible things that Germany did, because we've got bigger problems. Those bigger problems are what Ronald Reagan, when I was your age, called the evil empire, the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany. The Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany, but with nuclear weapons, and occupying half of Europe, Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, the Baltic states. And he wants to do what Hitler tried and failed to do, but with, of course, the great power advantage that the Soviet Union had from winning World War II and from occupying half of Europe. And so Germany was reconstructed because they needed Germany to help defend the West from what was perceived or misperceived. I'm not saying I agree that Stalin was a Russian version of Hitler. I'm not saying I agree, but that's the dominant view today in the United States, in Washington, and it was the dominant view during the Korean War. Right? When the Korean War started, many people were saying, this is it! This is it! Stalin is beginning his world conquest! Because the Korean War started in 1950, and the Soviet Union showed it had a nuclear weapon in 1949. So they didn't have to worry about American nuclear weapons anymore. So NATO was formed, the instigation to form the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and to integrate Western Germany within it, really got a big boost from the Korean War. And oh my God, he's starting Korea. Next, he'll strike Japan, like he took China in 1949. Mao Zedong works for Joseph Stalin. He's now going to then move into Europe. So this context of the Cold War and the need to rebuild Germany to help defend Europe, to develop Europe's economic capabilities, because Germany has always been the economic center of Europe since its unification in the 19th century, motivated the world to, well, you know, we'll just forget about what Hitler did. We'll just forget about it. I'm not saying really forget, but put that aside. We've got bigger problems, and that is the Soviet Union, communism. And so Germany was reunited. The occupation zones of France, Britain, and the United States formed Western Germany. And as I said, its capital was in Bonn. And European integration happens within that Cold War context. And so that's a theme in the chapter 5 that Germany has developed in this integration, and its development as a country, including its new military, including its economic enterprises, including its political structure, was directly closely tied with the development of European integration. Now, Germany may be the most Europeanized state from the point of view of how we described it last week in chapter 3 reading, in defining Europeanization, but still Germany can act nationalistically, given how we define nationalism in this class, right? In terms of trying to extend its influence, particularly during times of crisis. So this is very controversial, but Germany did show nationalism in 1990 when it recognized Croatia and Slovenia, breaking away from Yugoslavia on its own terms. It disregarded what Paris wanted, it disregarded what the United States wanted, it disregarded what the rest of what London wanted, and said, we are going to recognize Croatia and Slovenia because they have been traditional German cultural friends not in Germany, but in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Austro-Hungarian Empire. You know what anybody speak German here? The German word for Austria is Österreich. Österreich. It means the Eastern regime, the Eastern state. So it was part of the German world, is what I'm saying. The Habsburg Empire was part of the German world. And Croatia and Slovenia are today viewed as close allies of the German cultural world. What is called Mittel Europa, Middle Europe. Whereas the Serbs and Bulgarians, they were under the Turks for 500 years. They have a weird form of Christian religion called Orthodox religion, like the Russians, right? So they're different. So the point is that the Germans recognize Slovenia and Croatia because they view them as being abused by Serbia, the traditional friend of who? Russia and France. Serbia was allied with France and Russia in World War I and World War II. It was allied with France in World War I. And yeah, no, it was. I'm mixing Bulgaria. Bulgaria was allied against Russia. But Serbia was the ally of Russia in World War I and World War II. And France. Okay, so even the point I'm trying to make is, since I'm all about nationalism, right? Nationalism. Even this integration of Europe, of Germany, has struggled with the power of German nationalism at least once since the Cold War ended in 1991, with the break of the Soviet Union. Okay, and the fall of the Berlin Wall in the early 90s. So. France has relied upon Europeanization of Germany to promote social creativity in the relationship with Germany, rather than zero-sum social competition that tended to dominate Franco-German relations in the 20th century. Zero-sum relationship, right? That your gain is my loss, my gain is your loss. That's social competition. That's zero-sum thinking. But through European integration, France becomes great through European integration, with, again, the expectation was that during the Cold War, let's talk about France. So Macron, he's under challenge. As I showed in previous classes, there's a lot of speculation. He might lose next year to Marine Le Pen. But to win his outcome election in 2017, he was strongly favoring European integration. That was his main focus. And again, you know, I'm trying to bring in these side points because I want you to get excited. Like, I'm excited about this study, but like I said earlier, my professor 25 years ago told me the correct way for political scientists to study politics is to first recognize that political scientists are zoologists. What's a zoologist? Yes, but we're zoologists who study Homo sapiens. What's Homo sapiens? You're Homo sapiens. You're Homo sapiens. I'm Homo sapiens. In other words, we start looking for collective patterns of behavior that often cut across cultures. So Emmanuel Macron was a new, unusual political figure who worked for Francois Hollande, the socialist president, and then broke with him and formed his own party, and then won election in France as a young man who challenged his mentor, Francois Hollande, kind of interesting, a business person, a banker. You know what was most also talked about? There's a sexual element to this, right? That he was in school, and his teacher liked him. And after he graduated from high school, so he's over 18, so it's legal, he seduced his former teacher, and she divorced her husband and married Emmanuel Macron. So she's what, 30 years older than him? Kind of weird. Well, this pedophile discussion now going on in France. He's sort of like in a lot of ways a change. Like Barack Obama was a change to win the president, the first black man to become president of the United States. And then what happened after Barack Obama? Donald Trump. Is something similar going to happen in France? You have the socialists and the conservative, the Gaullists. You have Sarkozy and Hollande, and then the French people say, oh, we want to change. We want Macron. Oh, Macron didn't do what we wanted him to do. Maybe we'll vote for Marine Le Pen. We need somebody to shake things up. The way Americans vote for Donald Trump. Again, have we seen some kind of similar patterns in a nation state? France is a nation state. The United States is a nation state. Poland, Hungary, Russia, China, they're all nation states. So that's a context here. Something is going on around the whole world. So a central feature of Macron's strategy has been France's Europeanization. He really re-emphasized that to win his election against Marine Le Pen. He defeated Marine Le Pen in 2017. She will challenge him again next year. France should therefore be a good role model regarding the implementation of European Union rules, Macron called for. In this way, it can continue to play a leading role in shaping the future of the European Union. And so I highlighted in yellow the points I want to make sure I cover, right? And so maybe we can just, because there's so much, I mean, there's 36 pages of notes here, right? So we don't want to go through all of it. A troubled history. France is one of the founders, is one of the pro-European forces. It was one of the founding members of the European Union. Jean Monnet, a Frenchman, was one of the founding fathers of Europe. He's considered to be, for Europe, what George Washington might be for the United States. French political elites contribute to the construction of the European Union. And the French political elites, these people, not necessarily the mass of the population, they still display overall a high level of support for the European project. Now that makes France different from Britain. When you read the chapter on Britain, You're going to read how the Conservative Party under Margaret Thatcher was always strongly had a strong Eurosceptic component among that elite in the Conservative Party in France, Britain. But the French political elite, they've been more strongly supportive of European integration, but not necessarily the mass of the population. They rejected, the French rejected the draft European Union Constitution Treaty in 2005. They said no. It should not have been a surprise, and I don't think it was a surprise, but I don't really know how to explain it fully. In the Maastricht Treaty, the important Maastricht Treaty, I told you, right, that the Treaty of Maastricht, signed with the Dutch city of Maastricht, that came into effect in 1993, it first had to be ratified, like the Constitution Treaty, and the French had a referendum in 1992 on the Maastricht Treaty. And when the referendum campaign began, I remember reading Gallup public opinion poll. You know Gallup, we have Gallup in Korea, right? He asked you, who are you going to vote for? Who are you going to vote for? I think there's a Gallup organization in Korea. We have a company franchise here. Harris. Over 70% of French said, yeah, we think Maastricht is great. But then the political campaign began for the referendum, and you had French Donald Trump types and Marine Le Pen types in France saying, oh my God, this is going to undermine France's sovereignty. This is dangerous. And it barely passed in 1992. The referendum to approve the Maastricht Treaty passed by like 0.5%, or 1 or 1.5%. It passed. So move forward 15 years to 2005, when the French again had a referendum on the draft Constitution Treaty. Why did they not expect that the French would reject it? I really am not certain. I know the founding chairman of the Constitution Convention created a treaty for the European Union. They had a constitutional convention like the Americans did at the end of the 18th century. And who was the chairman of the convention? Valery Giscard d'Estaing. He's mentioned and discussed in this chapter quite a bit. They don't tell you he just died. He died last year of COVID-19. He's 89, died from COVID. He was the chairman. He was the chair of this great European convention to create the Constitution for the European Union. Did the French go, yay, France, yay? And they voted it down. And that led to the Lisbon Treaty that replaced it. It's 95% the same as the draft Constitution Treaty, almost the same. Not complete, but almost. And that was finally approved in 2009, 12 years ago. So, but the elite support it, not necessarily the mass of the population. So, Europe poussant, anybody speak French here? Anybody speak French? You could tell, I would like to hear somebody say this in French. Europe puissance, power through Europe is the idea. That France, there's only 65 million people in France. How can France be great? Like it was under Charlemagne, like it was under Napoleon. It can't be great on its own. It must be great in the world through the European Union. That's always been a theme for the French elite. If you want to be proud of France, if you, the French voter, want France to be a leading actor in the world, you should support European Union, because that's how we can multiply French power. It's a power multiplier for France. But you know, the mass of the population in France or United States or in Korea, they're not like you and me. They don't, and see this in the COVID-19 report, they don't pay attention to current events, political affairs, closely like I do. I spend hours every day reading everything in the news. That's my job. I talk to my brothers and sisters. They don't do that. And I'm amazed how different my thinking is from them, from their thinking. For example, on the COVID-19 vaccine, they're actually worried about its safety, including my sister. My sister
has a bachelor's degree in business. She works for the state of Ohio. She was telling me 2 days ago she might not get the vaccine because she's afraid it might not be safe. Why? Because some doctor said, oh, you know, this vaccine from Moderna or Pfizer, it's new technology, mRNA. It might, we don't know. So I had to persuade her to get the vaccine. She's got a bachelor's degree. She works for the state of Ohio. And I was just amazed. Like, I live in a different world from most people in the United States. They don't pay close attention to these things. And these French elites, they're talking about universal power multiplier. France, freak the world. And you talk to each other. France multiplier. Yes, France power multiplier. Yeah, French universal. Yeah. And their little world is them talking to each other. Right? But outside of their world, most French people don't know or care or think about universal. They think about, look at all these Muslims from Algeria living in my neighborhood. They don't look like me, they don't act like me, and I don't like them. And I blame the European Union. That's the difference. And maybe that's what happened in the Constitution treaties. Now we started saying, the other French leaders, and you need to talk. Yes, we draft Constitution for the European Union. We will have, yes, yes. And you talk to each other. And you tend to assume, I tend to assume, human beings tend to assume that my world is the broader world. And it's not. I mean, if I could get a vaccine tomorrow, I would. 1/3 of Americans are saying, I'm not going to get a vaccine. Oh, no. Bill Gates from Microsoft, he's going to put a computer chip in me with the vaccine to track me. Oh, it's not safe. I'm going to cry when I get the vaccine. I'm going to cry. Maybe not. But I'm going to be very emotional. Because all I do is think about it all day, all the time. COVID-19, pandemic, politics, nationalism. But that's not most of the people in the world. And that's not most people in France. Even though France was a founding member of the European Union. People, I mean, they're disengaged. There's levels of interest. I don't have really time to talk about this, and I'm going to stop you going about everything, you know, but this is the mass of the population in the US, in Korea, in France. This is percent of population. And this is change orientation. And I'm not going to go into it too much here. This is percent of population engagement. These people up here are about 1 or 2% of the population. They can pass a current events test. They read the newspaper completely every day. But as you go down to the mass of the population, these people, they don't even read news. They don't pay attention to newspapers. They don't follow what's going on with COVID-19 every second the way I do. And they live in a different world than me. They get information from social media influencers and entertainment officials and entertainment figures, from Beyonce, from boy bands. You know, that's where they get their information. And that's true in France. That's true in the US. That's true. And so, but I spend my time talking to people like you and other professors on the internet. And we tend to somehow assume that everybody's like me, and everybody's not like me and you. Not any way at all. So, yes, we'll have a draft new constitution, and everybody will love it. Yay! Oh my God, the French voted it down. Oh my God, the Dutch voted it down. The Netherlands was another founding member of the European Coal and Steel Community in 1951, and they said no too. You get these shocks. remind us, this is an elite-led project, this European integration. This is an elite-led project. And of course, this is different. And of course, Emmanuel Macron, he said, yes, that's what we need to do. We need to emphasize this. And of course, this is different from France's attitude towards Germany for the first half of the 20th century. Today, the nationalistic predisposition of the French, now it doesn't appear to be so unusual. You have nationalists in Poland, in Hungary, in other places. France has, been more open to economic reforms, and the socialists in 1983, François Hollande was a socialist, right? They wanted a more liberal market orientation, and also so did the Gaullists, the right wing, like Sarkozy. Was the last Gaullist president before François Hollande. From other perspectives, while the elite of Europe, the presidential candidates and the like have emphasized more Europeanization, more globalization, at the other tendency we see also from the beginning of European integration, the French mass public has also been nationalistic, suspicious of loss of sovereignty, right? And at times, French elites and citizens have demonstrated hesitancy in surrendering more sovereignty to the European Union. I told you, key moments, right? In 1954, the French National Assembly rejected the European Defense Community, right? This is 3 years after the European Coal and Steel Community. And again, the French elite are saying, oh, it's great, this European Coal and Steel Community, it's working so well. And, well, the European Coal and Steel Community integrated the coal and steel industries because you need coal and steel to make war, to build armies and ships and tanks. And so it makes sense, just 720 days later, 1,000 days later, 3 years later, well, let's integrate our militaries. Yes, let's integrate the French and German militaries. Yeah, it's a good idea, but yes, it's good, I've done it. Oh. And then the French National Assembly says, are you crazy? You're going to integrate the Germans with us after what they did just 9 years before? Boom, boom, boom. Oh. Was that right device? Oh my God! Yeah, we'll do it. European Defense Committee. Don't fall down. Don't fall down. Keep going. Okay, we'll go this way now, and we'll just keep emphasizing economic and business integration. I guess there was no real firm strategy or plan for how to prevent World War III in Europe. Like, we've got to do something. We had World War I, and that was horrible. And then we had World War II. We got to do something. Or else because we're going to all die. Because now we have nuclear weapons. And then the leader of French nationalism, Charles de Gaulle, the leader of the French resistance in World War II, of the government in exile, who is the great living embodiment of French nationalism. He supported European integration with Germany, but with a limit. In 1965, 1966, as the European High Commission, European Commission for the European Economic Community sought to impose economic policies. He pulled out all of France's representatives in the European Economic Community institutions, provoking the so-called empty chair crisis. France's chair in all of these committees, France's position was empty. Again, reminding us
that do not ignore nationalism, even amongst the French. Yeah, here it is. In 1992, only 51% of French voters approved the Maastricht Treaty. That formally created the European Union. But I remember for a few months before the vote, the public opinion polls from Gallup and Harris, over 70% of French supported it. But then as the campaign began and people are saying, oh my God, do you know what it means? It's gonna have all these people coming to France. These people down here. No, I don't want it. Donald Trump was not supposed to win the election in the US. Brexit was not supposed to win in Britain in 2016. You know, people like me say, no, they'll never leave the European Union. It's too costly. Oh, no, it can't happen. No, oh my God, they voted to leave. Marine Le Pen, she cannot win the election in France. No. They're far right. Oh no. Let's see what these people vote for next year in France. In 2005, a large majority of the French voters rejected the draft Constitution Treaty. Emmanuel Macron worked in this person's government under a French socialist president Hollande. He was so unpopular, he decided not to run for re-election. He was so unpopular, he didn't even try. And Emmanuel Macron emerged and saved France from Marine Le Pen. Now, 5 years next year, we'll see if he can continue to protect France from Marine Le Pen. French leaders were fighting over the direction of the European Union. Should it move in a more federal direction? What about the budget deficit? The French economy has been performing badly compared to Germany's economy. Slow growth, high unemployment. One of the problems with the European Union vaccine rollout is that, we know about AstraZeneca, and we know about Pfizer, BioNTech, and you know about Sputnik 5. The French also have a great national leader pharmaceutical company, Sanofi. And they tried to produce a COVID-19 vaccine, and it failed. Oh, so embarrassing. Sanofi is to France what Pfizer is to the US, and the big French project failed. That's one of the reasons why they have less vaccine. And the emergence of the National Front, today called the National Rally, as a political party focused on attacking the European Union. As I mentioned, Hollande was so unpopular, he didn't even attempt to run for re-election. And so we have French political cycles between left and right, punctuated by these two referendums in 1992 and 2005. You see, socialists versus Gaullists. People might be getting tired, particularly now that they are again in lockdown. They don't have enough vaccine. The British are running ahead with the vaccine. Half of adults have gotten their vaccination shot in Britain. France is not even halfway to what Britain has achieved. So he makes the point that a narrow community of actors at the top of the French elite undertook the historic decisions to participate in European integration. And it is a source of weakness in the relationship of France to the European Union. So keep that in mind. If we're going to have a peace strategy in Asia, it won't look exactly like this, but it's going to be elite-led. It has to be because Sobu and Moon Jae-in and Xi Jinping want it to work. It will have to be elite-led. It's not going to be led by these people. It's going to be led by these people. So they engaged in far-reaching debates in the 1950s amongst themselves.
yes, a European Defense Committee. Yes, that's a great idea. Let's do it. Yeah.
Right? But it's a narrow group of people talking about these things. There are different factions among the elite talking about confederation or community, economic community, or minimal cooperation. And the community view prevailed. And that led to the Treaty of Rome establishing the European Economic Community and established the common market. And all of these debates are occurring among a narrow group of bureaucrats, private interest representatives, and politicians. Right? European Union becomes a mass level political debate topic after the Maastricht Treaty, after the Cold War, in the 1990s, when the European Economic Community officially becomes the European Union. That's when it becomes a mass level political issue. I got to remember to, forgot to use the testing. Political project, not big rich capitalists in France and Germany. We want a European Economic Community. It's an elite-led. Britain in. He was always resentful of Britain because France was humiliated during World War II, and he partly blamed Britain for that. Winston Churchill, the great British leader, ordered the British Navy to sink the French Navy when it was under German control, and killed lots of French citizens, French sailors. In the course of the Fifth Republic, the presidential successors to de Gaulle played the leading role in affirming France's commitment to Europe. So after de Gaulle fades from the scene, removed by people like Daniel Cohn-Bendit, right? They continued to, his successors really promoted European integration. So we already mentioned President Giscard d'Estaing. They favored European integration, but they were attacked. There was resistance, and he overrode their resistance. President Mitterrand, the socialist president, was attacked by socialists for keeping France within the European monetary system. That was the beginning of common single currency, right? That France, Germany, Britain, all of these countries that were in the European monetary system agreed that they would adopt monetary policy to make sure their currencies did not change very much in value, that they would be stable value. And that took a commitment that was going to be politically limiting to these countries to control their own economic conditions because they could not manipulate the value of their currency to make their exports cheaper. You often hear about how the Japanese and the Koreans are fighting, and the Americans too, claiming that South Korea or Tokyo are manipulating their currency to keep it cheap so that Japanese exports are cheap. And so Sanyo takes sales away from Samsung. The Europeans could not do that in the European monetary system. So the elite of France will continue to be committed to this, and they played critical roles in issues like economic and monetary union, and Giscard prepared for it and established a cooperation framework with Germany. Again, this is all elite-led, and this is happening in the 1980s. Mitterrand obtained a time commitment from German Chancellor Helmut Kohl to implement the economic and monetary union. It's not a coincidence at this time that things are changing fast in Europe. I mean, remember, I told you, you don't know. Just a generation difference. I was born in 1962. So in 1962, The Cold War was happening. And when I was your age and before, it was the Soviet Union is going to try to take over the world. The Soviet Union is a Russian version of Adolf Hitler's Germany. They've got nuclear weapons. That was my world. That dominated all international relations coverage. The Cold War, the Soviet Union, they ordered Kim Il-sung to attack South Korea. They ordered Ho Chi Minh to take South Vietnam. The communists are going to take over the world. And then there was problems happening in the Soviet Union. We could see it in the 1970s. Their economy wasn't growing well. And then changes started happening in the leadership in the 1980s in the Soviet Union. Mikhail Gorbachev emerges as the leader. He's still alive. He's over 90. He's still alive. And he's in competition with Stalinists, like Ligachev was one. And another man named Romanov. It wasn't necessarily clear that a nice democratic, nice guy like Gorbachev was going to become the leader at this time of crisis in the Soviet Union. They might go more in the Stalinist direction, the Kim Il-sung direction. And so Mitterrand and Kohl and Margaret Thatcher really promoted accelerating European integration, in part to respond to the big things going on in the Soviet Union. Like, this guy Gorbachev, he's for real. We don't know what it's going to mean, though. Instability, change. And so in the 1980s, the pace of acceleration of European integration accelerates, partly to respond to the biggest event since World War II, the end of the Cold War. Of course, Vladimir Putin in Russia, he doesn't think the Soviet Union was a Russian version of Nazi Germany. So Chirac, a Gaullist, prepared the French economy, prepared for the Maastricht criteria, economic and monetary union, right? That's the Maastricht criteria. And the Maastricht criteria include that you have to limit your budget deficits, you have to keep your public debt low. And so over time, France has delegated a great degree of power to the European Union in top-down governance process for EU issues amidst domestic opposition to European integration. I already told you the National Front emerged attacking the European Union. But as I told you now, Marine Le Pen, after she replaced her father, is saying, oh, we don't want to leave the euro. We're going to stay in the euro. I love business. We just want to keep all of these people coming into our country from outside France. We don't want so many people coming into France. But we're going to stay in the European Union and in the euro. Oh, yeah. But the National Front didn't begin that way. The National Front emerged attacking the European Union. Okay, so they promoted this European integration without broad consensual support among interest groups or voters in France. It's an elite-led project. And France's intensive participation in European Union institutions does not have really strong roots in society like it has in Germany. In Germany, yeah, but not so much in France. And Macron is the latest display of this continuous elitist legacy. He comes from the best schools, the most elite part of French society, unlike Marine Le Pen. He had formerly been a civil servant, and so that's one of the reasons why people are really concerned about what will happen next year in France. Okay, let's. Okay, so do you want to take a break? Or no? Do you just want to end 10 minutes early? Okay, let's keep going. So a resilient narrative. Again, that this is how France is going to be great again. L'Europe puissant, meaning power thanks to Europe. Europe as a geopolitical power, led by France, of course. And that's been a stable theme since the 1960s, that if France is going to have grandeur, If France is going to have respect and glory in the world, it has to do it through the European Union. It can't do it through NATO because that's the United States. It's got to do it through the European Union. And we are a proud people, we French people. Prime Minister Valls said, Europe provides the additional sovereignty that allows our nations to enjoy greater weighting. Right? Again, it's a multiplier of power. Europe is a multiplier of French power. Multiplicateur de puissance. That the EU should act as an independent power in the world that can compete with the US, China, and in the past, the Soviet Union. And France's role in Europe is a good thing because it will make France great in the world. But again, that appeals to the people at the top in terms of that pyramid, in terms of their engagement and awareness of the world. Yeah. Multiplicateur de puissance. Yeah. What is this European Union? Okay, so thanks to France belonging to a credible network of states, its geopolitical situation benefits, because everyone believes in the world that all the other countries, when you're talking to France, when you're talking to the French diplomats, the French foreign minister, that you, Moon Jae-in, Suga of Japan, Joe Biden of US, Xi Jinping of China, know that the other member states of the European Union are pledged and committed to supporting each other, or else the European Union cannot exist. So when you argue with Paris, when you argue with Emmanuel Macron, France has that additional diplomatic bargaining leverage that US, China, Russia know that France has a tremendous amount of influence over Berlin, over Rome, over Madrid, over all the other countries in the European Union. So when France wants something, it's got a lot more bargaining leverage in diplomacy because of the European Union. You're not just talking to France. Okay, and that's a good point to do something a little different because I want to keep us focused here, if I can find it. Okay, so it's time for a poll. Is that the poll? Yeah. So this one. This one? Okay. This one? And so I want to find the right poll. My question to you is, today, who's really the greatest authority on Europe's role in facing global crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic? If you're Moon Jae-in and you have just learned that a new variant of the coronavirus has emerged in India, and you need to know, what should we do about this new, more dangerous coronavirus variant that has emerged in India? Who do you call? Who do you first call? European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen? European Council President Charles Michel? European High Representative for the Common Foreign Security Policy, Josep Borrell? German Chancellor Angela Merkel? Or French President Emmanuel Macron? If you need to call Europe, if you need to talk representing the European Union, I am Moon Jae-in, President Moon Jae-in. I need to talk to somebody who knows how to get things done in Europe, and we don't have any time. Who do I spend my precious limited time calling? Ursula von der Leyen? Did you know that Charles Michel is president of the European Council? Who do you call? Supposedly, Henry Kissinger, the old man who was Secretary of State for the United States in the early 1970s, he said, if I want to call Europe, if I want to talk to Europe, I don't know who I'm supposed to call. Call Europe on the phone. Who do you call? The Commission President? The European Council President? Germany has played the leading role in addressing all of these crises. So we have 2 more votes. 2 more votes. So some of you think if you need to talk to somebody who can speak for Europe, the view appears to be you need to call Angela. Yeah, you might call Ursula, and you might call Charles, and you might call Josep. But if you don't have a lot of time, because a president's day, a diplomat's day, a bureaucrat's day, an ambassador's day is a day when they wake up in the morning, right? They went to a party, another diplomat party, drank too much, ate too much, and they wake up in the morning. Oh, they didn't have sleep. And their day is filled with crises. Little crises, big problems. Problems that demand an answer now. Because you've got, after this problem, after this issue that you solve, you've got the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And you never have enough time to do everything you need to do. So Moon Jae-in doesn't have time to say, well, I'm Moon Jae-in, president of South Korea. I really support your immigration. No, he's going to call the person he thinks he needs to call to get an answer, a solution, even if it's a temporary solution, now. Because in an hour, he's got to talk to Vladimir Putin about the latest economic activity between Russia and North Korea. I don't have time to talk to all these people. I got to talk to somebody and go and move on to the next crisis, and the next crisis, and the next crisis, until and then I do it all again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. And that's the theme of the liberal intergovernmentalist perspective. The states of the European Union are still the leading actors in the European integration. The European Council is the most powerful body, the most powerful institution in the European Union. And who sits on the European Council? Who sits on the European Council? Who are members of the European Council? Yes, the prime ministers and presidents. And that meets at least twice every 6 months. And this person, they gave him the label president, but he's not really a president. He's a general secretary. He's the head secretary for the council. For European Council. To prepare for those meetings that happen at least twice every 6 months. Close that, okay. And so, yeah. So I had a. Is that what the? Yeah, this is another about the vaccine. The European Union has been slow in getting the vaccine out. Because the European Union is not a country, it's not a state. It has to be cautious. It has to be slow because it's run by politicians who they don't want to be blamed for any mistakes. And you have 27 member countries. If you make a mistake, you're going to infuriate somebody. So it's slow and focuses on consensus. So they've been really slow in vaccinating people in this horrible pandemic that's making all of our lives miserable, right? This is the advisor to Donald Trump in the United States. He notes that the European Union, the European Union shopped for vaccines like a customer. Okay, we need to get millions and millions, hundreds of millions of doses. Who's going to give us the best offer in terms of price? Because we can't spend too much money because it's German money and French money and Italian money. We have to be careful and cautious. The Americans said, no, spend as much money as you can, move as fast as you can, work closely with the government, with the factories, with the drug makers, spending much more heavily to accelerate vaccine development. Money's no object for the United States during this time of crisis. It was for the Europeans because they've got 27 member states. They assumed that simply contracting to acquire doses would be enough. Recall Dr. Sluey, whom President Donald Trump hired to speed the vaccine development. In fact, what was very important was to be a full active partner in the development and the manufacturing of the vaccine, the government, the state, and to do so very early. Well, if you're Ursula von der Leyen, who are you supposed to work with? Sanofi? Pfizer? AstraZeneca? Well, they're not even in the European Union anymore. No, we got to be careful. We can't favor any national company. We can't identify that, yes, BioNTech, German, Pfizer, that's the better one. Sorry, Sanofi. They couldn't. They have to be cautious because of nationalism, anger, potential anger and hostility. They go on. Pricing has been very important since the beginning for the Europeans. Sandro Galina, the European Union's main vaccine negotiator, told lawmakers in February, we're talking about taxpayers' money. Yeah, but Europe's first deal with AstraZeneca came in August, months after the United States. And while Europe negotiated as a powerful buyer, it lacked the wartime procurement powers the Trump administration used to secure raw materials for the American companies. The Korean Defense Production Act, the 1950 Korean Defense Production Act, was the act passed at the beginning of the Korean War. The United States government declared that it could intervene and order companies. You must satisfy the American military's requirement or the American government's requirements before you satisfy your other customers. That's the wartime policy powers that the United States government has. European Union doesn't have wartime procurement powers. It's not a nation state. It's got to be all about consensus, agreement, talk, and that means they're slow. At the worst public health crisis in 100 years. And of course, the British are going, ha, 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 we told you European Union sucks. Ha, 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 ha. Maybe Marine Le Pen will win next year. The United States made the negotiations easy. Its critics say far too easy by signing away any right to intellectual property. Even though the U.S. government laboratories and scientists were involved in this, they let the companies keep the money and absolving the drug companies of any liability. If the vaccines were dangerous or failed, the companies could not be sued. European Union can't do that. Washington paid for the development and the trials. The companies had essentially nothing to lose. Drug makers expected the same concessions in Europe, but the back and forth over liability was the major stumbling block. Ms. Galina said, European negotiators had to reconcile disparate liability laws across the multiple countries, the 27 countries, finding common ground among 27 leaders. God. In a crisis, it always becomes clear that the European Union is not a country, said Jakob Kierkegaard of the German Marshall Fund. He said the bloc approached vaccine procurement like a contract negotiation when in fact it was a zero-sum game with limited supply. Zero-sum game, competition among the countries. Who's going to get the supply first? Social competition. European institutions are by design risk averse. One of the founding tenets of the European Union is called the precautionary principle. The bloc errs on the side of caution when risks are unclear. That, some analysts have said, hurt the bloc. German leaders argued for a heftier bet on vaccines from Pfizer, BioNTech, and CureVac, but they were based on unproven messenger RNA technology. I told you, right? My sister was thinking about not getting a vaccine because this is new technology, according to one silly doctor. I don't know if I'm going to get it. It's just new. And it were more expensive. The bloc had just settled a thorny economic rescue package for the pandemic, and there was little appetite among the members for more risk or spending. It didn't help that Europe backed the wrong horse in some cases. It spent billions on a vaccine candidate from the French drug maker Sanofi and Britain's GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, that was delayed by over a year after disappointing results. This is difficult to do, to make these vaccines. That company Sanofi, I remember in fall 2019, Sanofi developed a new vaccine against dengue fever. Dengue fever, you don't have it in Korea, but they have it in Philippines, in tropical countries. Dengue, D-E-N-G-U-E. And Sanofi, thank you, Sanofi, for coming up with a vaccine against the scourge of dengue fever. And they started vaccinating children. And the latest report I saw, 150 Filipino children have died because of the DengueVax Sanofi vaccine. According to the Philippine government, 150 Filipino children have died. It's not easy to make these vaccines. So, and that's the great French champion in pharmaceutical industry, Sanofi. GSK failed as well. Dr. Van Gucht of Belgium agreed, but he said European leaders will likely take nationalistic lessons from the past months. I think we relied a little too much on free markets. What you really need to do from the beginning is really make sure you produce the vaccines on your own territory and that you're destined for your own population. Nationalism, nationalism, nationalism. There was another report here. Oh, and then we talked about this last class, right? There were some reports that people get the AstraZeneca vaccine, they get blood clots in their brain. So few people have died. Out of the millions vaccinated, a few people have bled and died. It's minuscule. You have as much chance of dying from blood clots from the AZ vaccine, and I know you got it here in Korea, as you have being struck by lightning. But it's high profile. This person took the AZ vaccine and his brain started bleeding. Oh, how horrible. Ah! 7 people out of 3 million. Every time you get into a car to drive somewhere in Seoul, you have maybe 1 in 2,000 chance of dying. Ah! 7 people died of blood clots. And so what did they do? The Germans halted the vaccination. Every day, thousands of people die from this coronavirus, and they stopped the AZ vaccinations, the AstraZeneca vaccinations. Again, you see reference to precautionary principle there. With Germany's position as first among equals in the European Union. We're all equal in the European Union, but some of us are more equal than others. With Germany's position first among equals in the European Union and a broader wariness against appearing permissive on vaccine safety, others quickly followed, including France, Italy, and Spain, in stopping the AZ vaccinations. And then they restarted them, but still everybody's talking about, I might get a brain hemorrhage. Oh, I don't want to get a brain hemorrhage. No, I don't want to get a vaccine. I don't really need a vaccine. I don't know anybody who's gotten sick. I don't really care. I'm not going to get your AZ vaccine. These people down here who live their lives and don't read everything in the media the way we do. Brain hemorrhage. Vaccine skepticism was already high in Europe, especially toward the AstraZeneca shot on which Europe has built its plans. The proportion of people willing to get the shot has in some polls dropped significantly below the 70% needed to achieve herd immunity. How profile vivid events that are really scary have a way of controlling the public imagination. They got under COVAX, South Korea got the AZ vaccine. Did anybody get sick in South Korea? You didn't hear it, right? No? Yeah, you got like a couple 100,000 doses of AZ vaccine 2 or 3 weeks ago. But not because of the vaccine. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to vaccinate everybody, somebody's going to die, but it could be for many things. But nothing about bleeding, blood. Oh, God. Pausing, she added, can be a way of reassuring the public that but even if you act, if you're the German government, you pause, you're trying to reassure the people of Germany and France that you, the government leadership, the authorities, the leaders of the German people, you are being careful and cautious because people want to feel secure, even if it's irrational. I said, every day you delay, thousands die. Thousands die of COVID-19. Pausing, she added, can be a way of reassuring the public that you as a public health authority or as a government take super seriously any signal that comes up like this. The hope is that this builds trust in the health authorities, demonstrating that they put caution and safety ahead of rushing shots into arms. Even if people remain unsure about the vaccines themselves, perhaps high trust in the vaccinators could overcome this. So yeah, that was the lead up to that question I gave you, right? Asked whether Americans might ever face such a dilemma, Dr. Prasad countered that they already did. Though trials may show the one-shot Johnson & Johnson with a lower efficacy rate than two-shot variants like Pfizer, health officials hailed its simpler distribution as a breakthrough in the push for herd immunity. Americans have largely gone along. We don't always see it, Dr. Broussard said, of these ethical trade-offs, but it actually comes up all the time. So that was the lead up to that survey question I asked you. If you're going to talk to Europe, if you want to talk to what we're going to do here to address this emergency crisis, who are you going to call? Angela Merkel, the German government, the French government, or are you going to talk to Ursula von der Leyen? She doesn't speak for Germany. She's German. Angela Merkel might like her, but she's not a German official. That's the point that the World Health Organization director made. In dealing with a pandemic, the most important quality you need is leadership. 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 In other words, you need authority. You can't understand leadership and authority unless you understand nationalism. So what's the next? Essay here that I have. And so, click here, okay. And so we go here. Okay, so I just wanted to, let's go back to those notes. Yes, so you can see that's always been a theme in France, that we need European integration to make France great again. And it's continued under Emmanuel Macron and others, despite the no referendum on the draft EU Constitution Treaty, and even with the Great Recession that happened before, obviously, the pandemic. This is starting to lose some credibility with the immigration crisis. And so 3 factors explain the continuing success of l'Europe puissant. War, as I said, this is a theme that comes up in the literature all the time. War with France's neighbors has become inconceivable. But for the mass of the public, I should get back my laser pointer, you know, so I don't have to keep getting up like this. But like for these people, they don't think about, is war inevitable? They're not thinking about these, they're thinking about their lives, which are not focused on political science. And in fact, France is supposedly at war with terrorism. Again, contradicting the idea that European Union is all about peace. If Europe and the West is at war, is it at war because of this commitment of supporting the United States as an ally in NATO, as part of the Euro-Atlantic structures? I used to hear so much about in Bulgaria, the Evro-Atlantichski strukturi, the Euro-Atlantic structures, NATO and the European Union, they all go together. And now we're at war with Islam because of America's support for Israel. The dominant European Union narrative updates the traditional messianic ambition in French political culture. That's nationalism, French national pride and glory in the world. Because it takes into account that France cannot alone realistically claim to play a leading role in world affairs. This keeps coming up again and again and again in this chapter, and it's in other books as well, that is a major part of French support for European integration. France cannot be the glorious, glorious, glorious power it was under Napoleon, Louis XIV, under its glorious history, unless it's part of the European integration. And events from 1940 to the present seem to offer the European Union as a solution to France's decline compared to US and other countries. And so then how did European Union become a mass political politics issue? And again, that was how Jean-Marie Le Pen and Marine Le Pen and the National Front became popular, attacking the European Union, even though now she says she's going to stay in Europe, in the Eurozone, if she becomes president next year. So until the 1990s, European issues appeared not to affect significantly French politics. There was some reaction on them to the Maastricht Treaty, but and it caused some conflicts among the right-wing elite, the Gaullist elite. And then the 2005 rejection of the draft Constitution Treaty caused some splits among the left elite in France. This relationship of the government to the European Union became an issue in the 1990s in party politics in France, attacking each other, which it had not been before the 1990s, really. Again, this is all before the pandemic. So, and we already emphasized how even as there has been more attack or controversy and discussion and argument about Europe, Emmanuel Macron, to win in 2017, strongly emphasized a recommitment of France to European integration. It was a secondary issue for the elite in Europe until the 2007 campaign for president. And Then in 2012, it became, in the presidential elections, Europe was one of the top issues of dispute. And in 2017, the role of Europe in the campaigns between Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron in the presidential elections, it was a primary issue, which is, again, not the case during the first 30 years of European integration, particularly economic and monetary union. And as I already said, she's not claiming, she's not going to challenge this. And that emerged because of the Great Recession, the political success of the extreme political forces, particularly the National Front, and then the election of Macron on a pro-EU agenda. And now the European Union is screwing up with the vaccine. Oh my God. There's a lot of detail here. You know, politicians, they focus on winning elections, and most French people don't care about elections. I mean, they don't care about European Union until relatively recently, as they look for someone to blame for all of this immigration and our economic dislocation and our, I mean, this vaccine problem, that's a big problem, because you just saw the New York Times report. They're saying it's the nature of the European Union for them to go slow. And now, as we speak, they're going into their third lockdown, where people have to stay in their apartments in France. Number 3. Meanwhile, what, 50% of all adults in Britain have gotten at least one shot? Oh my gosh. I'm making myself depressed. So they talk about the different approaches of the French political leaders to Europe. This notion of emphasizing the European Union as a way by which for France to become competitive in the world, including economically competitive, and adopting more market reforms, reducing the size of the French welfare state, reducing the amount of taxes that French businesses pay, because we have to have more economic dynamic capitalist accumulation, which means we have to spend less money on welfare services because we have to take less money in taxes. And this is necessary for France to be a leader in a world where you cannot be a leader if you're not an economic leader. You want to be a leader in the world, you must be an economic leader. That applies to the Chinese, and it applies to the Americans, and it applies to the Europeans. This person, you know, he's just been found guilty. He's supposed to go to jail. He was just found guilty like last week for corruption. Sarkozy. He's a right-wing leader. He was a former president, was thinking about running again for office. Hollande, after Sarkozy, also increased France's commitment to the European Union, and he had defeated Sarkozy, who was seeking re-election and failed to get re-election. And I told you, Hollande became president and became so unpopular, he didn't even bother to run for re-election. Didn't even try. So both Sarkozy and Hollande attempted to appeal simultaneously to broad French support for the principle of European integration while confronting severe criticism for their specific policy proposals. He's a socialist, and he wants to reform the welfare state and reduce the size of the welfare state so that there's less taxation in France and more economic dynamism, but more inequality, right? Sarkozy also wants to do. Hollande, of course, is a socialist, so he's supposed to be in favor of the workers, in favor of social welfare programs. And here he is was seeking to reduce the size of the welfare programs in France. He was unpopular for a lot of reasons, but that was a main reason why he was unpopular. He also had affairs with young women and things like that were embarrassing. But the harder Euroscepticism from French parties on the extreme left and right resulted in the soft Euroscepticism among the mainstream parties. So when you have particularly Marine Le Pen's and National Front, that's the main challenge. The Marxists, Leninists, the communists, they're around, but they don't win elections because they're not openly nationalistic. The National Front is openly French nationalistic. And she has followed a highly critical line towards the European Union, focusing especially on economic and monetary union. She portrayed in her campaigns that the European Union was responsible for France's deindustrialization and decline in purchasing power of much of the population. With European integration, if you're a French company, why not move your factory to Poland? Move your factory to Slovakia, to Czech Republic, where you can pay workers 1/3 or 1/4 what you have to pay French workers. You can sell your products anywhere in a single market. It doesn't matter where they're produced. You can sell them anywhere. So that means French workers lose good paying jobs. So Europe has many different policy aspects or features to it, dimensions, which Le Pen linked in her campaign appeals. She blamed the European Union for cuts in French welfare and for increases in migration into France. She blamed the European Union for its democratic deficit. It's an elite-led project, right? And that the mainstream parties, the socialists and the Gaullists, have always supported this European project at the expense of the people, the hardworking people of France. She has appealed to French voters by blaming Brussels for France's problems. These appeals attracted a very diverse section of the French electorate. Northern France, where the manufacturing was concentrated, they're the ones that lost most of the manufacturing capacity that moved to cheap Hungary and Poland and Bulgaria and Slovakia and Czech Republic. Southern France was the place where migrants came in from Northern Africa and Middle East. And she has worked, after she got rid of her father, who was kind of crazy when in his old age, to make, you saw from the news report last class, right? To make the Front National, or now it's called the National Rally, not such a radical far-right party, trying to make it appear to be simply a party that is saying things that everybody is saying. Even Emmanuel Macron is talking about Islamo-separatism, which she and her party have been complaining about Muslim migration for decades. And the Front National was targeted with charges for being racist, with its xenophobic and anti-immigration position. So a history in terms of how we got to where we are today. The Front National has repeated its position on gaining control of its borders against immigration. And so the National Front has appeared to be a normal party. Now the European Union is also emphasizing strengthening its borders against migration. So the, oh, okay. Hey, I forgot to do something. I need to talk about the final exam, the midterm exam. Did you notice that? I posted the midterm exam on the cyber campus. And here is the first draft of your midterm paper. So here's your thesis. After studying the class material for the first 7 weeks of the course Explain whether or not Europeanization will lead to European identity becoming more important than existing national identities for the typical citizen of the European Union by the end of the 21st century. In 79 years from now, by the end of the century, will we see a European identity become more important than existing national identities? So the first draft is due Saturday, September 17th of April at 7 in the morning. I will write comments on it and send it back to you so that you can rewrite it, and then we will meet during week 8. You will each meet with me on Zoom, and I will have an individual Zoom session with you to discuss my comments on your first draft. Okay? Some of you, a lot of you were in my classes last semester, so you know the procedure. And so, and then you will rewrite the paper and then submit it to me for a final grade by Saturday, May 1. You should use and cite specific information from at least 3 different chapters, from chapters 1 through 10, to support, refine, and develop your ideas. I keep making that point in the paragraphs to you, right? I don't want just opinions. I need you to make statements that you claim are the truth. And you prove to me that your statements are truth statements by providing evidence from scholarly academic sources in the reading. Okay? And so, will we see a European identity in 80 years build upon and become stronger than German, Italian, French identity? And that leads into the next exercise, and we'll talk more about that. A new party has been successful in the Netherlands. For years, right-wing populists have been a driving force in the Netherlands, like Geert Wilders. But this week, a pan-European party called Volt shook things up. Lost among the mostly humdrum national elections in the Netherlands this week was the emergence of Volt, an anti-populist, pro-Europe party made up of students, that's you, and young professionals that snatched 3 seats in the Dutch parliament, the first national electoral success in its 5 years of existence. Volt wasn't the only outsider group to win a seat or 2 in the elections. One politician arrived at Parliament driving a tractor with flashing lights to claim her newly won seat for a farmers' party. Sylvana Simons, a former TV presenter, won a seat for BJ1, an anti-capitalist party. A new far-right anti-immigrant party won 4 seats. Over the last 2 decades, however, it was populist and far-right parties that played the insurgent role in Dutch politics, promoting anti-immigrant, anti-establishment, and anti-European policies. While never a serious threat to seize power in 2016, representatives of these parties initiated one referendum in the Netherlands on an EU trade treaty with Ukraine, temporarily halting the deal. So, according to the Dutch constitution, that they have to, if they get a certain number of signatures on a petition, you can put a referendum to the Dutch people on some issue. And they did this in 2016 by Geert Wilders of the People's Party protesting against bringing Ukraine into a free trade area with the European Union. And they had the referendum. There was low turnout, but it passed to reject the free trade agreement of European Union with Ukraine by the Dutch voters. And you know what? They did it anyway. The European Union came up with a new FTA with Ukraine anyway. And if you're a populist, they see those European leaders, they hate the people of France, the people of the Netherlands. They think we're silly idiots. They don't listen to us. This makes this week's victory for newcomer Volt all the more remarkable. The party is staunchly pro-Europe, something that most traditional parties had thought was a complete turnoff for voters. So they talked to this person. Most people of my generation grew up paying in euros and never having to think about crossing borders in Europe, said Laurens Dassin, 35, the French-Dutch leader, the party's Dutch leader. For us, Europe is a fact of life. Prime Minister Mark Rutte, whose center-right Party for Freedom and Democracy comfortably won the greatest number of seats for the 4th time since 2010, has had a tense relationship with Europe. Last year, for example, he upset Southern European countries when he refused to discuss financial support during the pandemic and brought a biography of Chopin to the meetings because he wasn't planning on talking anyway. The success of Volt in the Netherlands is all the more remarkable in that it isn't even a Dutch party, but an offshoot of a European movement with 9,000 members scattered across Europe and a few more in Switzerland and Albania. The main party was established in 2016 by Andrea Venzon, 29, an Italian living in London, and has a presence in every one of the 27 member states of the European Union. Mr. Dassen, who was raised in Knegsel, a village near Eindhoven, I think that's Switzerland, played in the local youth orchestra, and after studying business management, went to work at, no, that's Netherlands, sorry, at ABN AMRO Bank, checking processes for transactions and money laundering. Another pro-European party, D66, won an extra 4 seats this week, making it the 2nd largest party in the parliament. Its leader, Sigrid Kaag, is a former United Nations Special Envoy for Syria and the outgoing Foreign Minister of Trade and Development. Because no party in the Dutch parliament commands a majority, analysts said the idiosyncrasies of coalition building could bring Volt into the governing bloc along with Mr. Rutte and Ms. Kaag. Whatever outcome of that horse trading, analysts think that Volt's future is bright in the Netherlands. They could be big here and double their seats if they manage to go even stronger on the climate, said Felix Roderberg, a campaign strategist long affiliated with the Social Democratic PVDA. Volt has the youth. There will be only be more of those in the future. The party is on a winning streak in other parts of Europe, though nothing else is as high profile as its victories in the Netherlands. Volt now has over 30 elected representatives across Europe, mainly in municipalities in Germany and Italy, but it has also won its first seat in the European Parliament in the person of Damian Bosselager, 33. In coming months, Volt will be running candidates in national elections in Bulgaria and Germany, in a regional vote in Spain and local elections in Italy. Following Brexit this year, its British members are starting a Rejoin Europe campaign. Its leaders emphasize Volt's main character, which they say differentiates it from any other country in Europe. Okay, so, of course, we're running out of time. My question to you is then, click here? Here? Click here? Please respond to the following statement. The current young and future generations of Europe will overall have an increasingly strong pan-European identity. Vote! Three more. Is that it? One more. Okay. Click here. Here. This one? Okay. So there you see the results. Neutral cannot decide. But yeah, that's the point here, right? That, yeah, older generations are more Eurosceptic and more hostile to Europe. But younger people, and those people were in their 30s, 35, 33. Maastricht Treaty was signed in 1991, 92. So almost 30 years ago. These people, since they've been politically aware, they've always used the euro. They travel. They've studied in other countries. They speak multiple languages, and they're getting jobs in companies, European multinational companies that are spread all over Europe, with factories and businesses and offices all over the European Union. That's the context. So that's the reason I asked that midterm question. Do you think in 80 years that there will be a stronger and stronger and stronger European identity as globalization in Europe, Europeanization continues among governments, among businesses, among political parties, among interest groups. Okay, so I have to stop this. And so click here. Here. Okay. And so click that, and then I gotta click leave.